MP, it's our final event of the year.
Oh, it's all a bit sad, Bretto, but after 4 big events for 2018, we are going out with a bang with one more wellness base camp, and the location for this one is regional Victoria. The great town of Bendigo awaits.
Oh, and how's this for a lineup, MP? Bendigo will be rocking with the rock star of wellness, Damien Christoph.
The art of self-love angel herself, Kim Morrison, hits the stage.
As will the natural nutritionist, Steph Lowe.
And I'll tell you what, Steph's presentation at the summit on fasting was a showstopper. You'll be there, Bretto. I'll be there too.
And Wendy Stewart from Wendy's Way will be there to share her inspirational story, which really did go off at the Wellness Summit earlier this year.
It's Saturday, October 27 at the beautiful All Seasons Resort Hotel in Bendigo, and tickets are selling fast.
2-for-1 tickets for this one day of inspiration, information and empowerment are available at thewellnessbasecamp.com.
That's right, folks. Get your 2-for-1 tickets at thewellnessbasecamp.com before they run out and then the price goes up.
Finish your year of wellness in style at the Wellness Base Camp in Bendigo, Saturday, October 27.
Tickets at thewellnessbasecamp.com.
TheWellnessCouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is the desire for our relationship to fulfill everything for us.
Juicy.
Before we dive into that, I'd love to remind you to jump onto nourishingthemother.com.au and sign up to join our tribe. Once a week, we'll shoot you off an email that has links to everything we've put out in the world, and you can pick and choose where you'd love to dive deeper. And occasionally we send what's called a love letter to our intimate tribe. Those of you who've taken the time, energy and effort to do that step of signing up, we know that you're a conscious woman like us, and that allows us the space to feel a little bit more freedom to go a little bit more intimate in some emails, doesn't it?
It does.
If you'd like to be a little bit more intimate with us too, nourishingthemother.com.au.
And this is the last week to actually get access to our Loathing to Loving program at our current price. We wanted to mention that because we've got so many emails and messages through Facebook asking us when the price rise is going up, because it is. It's going up on Monday the 29th of October to $647. So we do have the $289 offer available on a payment plan too, across 3 months, 3 payments. So if you have been on the cusp of diving in, now's the time.
And it is lifetime access, so it does mean you get as much time as you want to dip in and out of the content, and it just means that then you become a lifetime member with us. So access to our members only Facebook group, and then 3 live rounds a year is what we run with this particular program. It's 5 weeks of 5 weeks of facilitation 3 times a year, and you can choose to dip in as many as you like. And often women are entering that with a purpose, a belief, a challenge, a problem,
A question. Intention.
And so then we're spending 5 weeks really integrating with that. So if you're really ready to take the learnings of the podcast a bit deeper, then we desperately, heartwarmingly, overwhelmingly would love to help you do that. So please jump on while you still can. All right. Today, Bridget, the desire for our relationship to fulfill everything for us. So I wondered if you might start by just giving us a bit of your intellectualness. A bit of background.
Yeah. So I guess my desire to understand relationship to this level has probably come from the pains and voids that I found as I navigated my own relationship early on, particularly. I entered my relationship with my husband when I was 18, and he was, quite a bit older, and I had really
because he's about 11 years older.
9 years older. I was 18, he was 27.
Yeah.
And
before you even became conscious parenting, you were conscious relationshiping.
Yeah, you should have my book list, book list about
your evolution.
Oh my God. Like the blogs I used to read, and like the books that I've got around marriage, and around relating and what marriage meant. That was my jam for years. And so it came from my own pain, my own pain of feeling like, why doesn't he get me? Like, why isn't he excited about this? Like, I'm excited about this. Why can't he, focus and pay attention on me when I'm really wanting to talk to him deeply about something. It came from all of my own pain, you know, wanting to understand, I guess at this point around, you know, why we can't expect our intimate relationships to be everything to us. And it was actually, funnily enough, my mum and some wisdom that she imparted when she said to me, you know, it's really important to retain something that's just for you in every area of your life, that don't rely on your relationship to be all of those things. You know, to have a little bit that's socially just yours, and a little bit financially that's just yours, and a little bit around the home that's just for you, so that you don't give up pieces of yourself for your marriage or your relationship, so that you retain your, I think, sovereignty in your relationship. And that was really, I didn't really think it was profound at the time, but it's been something that I've continually thought about as a really profound truth. And so, yeah, as I say, it's from that pain, that desire to know about relationship that I sought to understand, I guess, more of the universal principles that govern human relationships and relating, and the fact that we might enact these social constructs of marriage and relationship, and we have taboos, and we have, you know, these concepts of right and wrong, but ultimately we are all inwardly inspired and governed by our own set of values. And relationships work when both people in the relationship feel like they're getting their values met. And it's when they're not getting those met. Values being the things that are most inspiring, the things that we're most passionate about, the things that consume us in conversation, in thought, in what we want to create in the world, the things that we love to talk to others about, the things that we organise our environment around, the things that we read. Essentially who we are and what we spend our time and thought doing. And so when those can be in relationship balanced, so that not that you value the same thing necessarily, but that you can each respect each other's values. And there's enough overlap for you to have enough in common that you're moving in a direction together. That is when there's connection and depth in a relationship, and there's a sense of direction going forward. But when we're out of respect for our partner's values, or one person in the relationship's values are dramatically changing, that is when relationships can begin to feel like they're on shakier ground. Because if you start to lose who you were and you're scrambling, trying to figure out who you are now, then all of the things that you've identified yourself by now suddenly come up into question. And the people that you identify yourself with, you start to wonder, well, is that me anymore? And is that what I want anymore? And we stay in a relationship for various reasons. But one of those is as long as our values are met. And another one can be because we feel we have to. And so that then leads to why affairs happen. And you and I have got so many stories lately of what we see unfolding around us in terms of people clearly getting their needs met elsewhere and clearly having emotional connection elsewhere, but almost staying in the delusion of that not happening because they're in this committed relationship, which they're not actually committed to because they're having their needs met elsewhere. But because of our social constructs around it, there's an inability for people to own their transgression or own their different desires and their inability or unwillingness to seek to have those desires met in relationship with the person that they've chosen to be in a relationship with. So it's fraught, it's pain, it's deep, you know, but I think it's really worth unpacking.
I often think when you were talking about we get our needs met, I think that's often a conversation we don't have in an affair. I think now it's socially acceptable to be like, oh, well, you just leave, because I think we spent so many hundreds, if not thousands of years being tied to, I will put it in, you know, a monogamous male-female relationship, that the husband would often have dalliances and the woman had no other options.
Yeah,
she had to stay.
She had to stay because that was her financial security.
Everything, right?
Her social standing.
Everything. And I mean, still now we're in societies where that is still the case. So I think for so many years we have had no other option, that now it's like, you've got an option, fucking leave.
Yeah. And it's almost like, well, fuck him.
Yeah, and who are you to stay? Where is your self-worth at, you know?
We think about, you know, how attacked Hillary Clinton was.
Yes, exactly.
Staying.
Yeah, exactly. And I find so many fascinating and delicious nuances in these conversations because it's something I'm particularly fascinated by. And following on from our podcast, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, but whatever you condemn, you breed, attract, or become. And there is nothing more profound than an affair.
Yeah.
And I think often that's when it's so hard to own, because for so many years, maybe it's because of your childhood story, maybe it's not. You have this label on the type of person that has an affair, the type of person that wanders, who that person is. And then all of a sudden you come screaming into it.
Yeah.
And that hurts. And it hurts so bad that sometimes we can't even say out loud, I have become that person, because what that requires of our identity to dismantle is too painful. And so often this is when, you know, the truth kind of dribbles out over the course of many years, because it's too hard to shed one identity in such a huge whack, I think.
Yeah.
But I find it fascinating that also when we're talking about, which you and I are really passionate about, which is long-term monogamous relationship, and looking at that as a people-growing, I want to say organism and I want to say mechanism, and let's say people-growing organism, that there's dynamics at play there, and each person is pushing that other person's boundaries, and no one will go outside of that relationship unless someone isn't showing up in that relationship.
Yeah.
And I think this is part of an affair that's never spoken about. I
really agree, because that ownership, that, you know, two sides to every story, or, you know, there's always takes two to tango, that often is left out of the truth of how affairs manifest.
Yes.
Because the reality is if someone's values are being met within a relationship, and there's communication and there's a willingness to show up even when it's uncomfortable, then it's almost not really a ripe ground for an affair, because each person's feeling somewhat fulfilled.
Yes, yeah. So I find this really fascinating when we're looking at that. I find it fascinating that often if we really stripped affairs back to not so much being another person, but being how I feel, and I mean, Esther Perel talks about this beautifully, but if we stripped it back to that, often what we're looking for is not the other person, but a reflected sense of self that feels so good. So it's not even, you know, oh, this person is this. No, I just like how they see me.
Yeah.
And when they see me that way, I get to see me that way, and it feels so good.
And I love how I feel when I'm with them.
Yes.
Because so often, you know, the difference and the excitement of something new creates a different awakening of some part of ourselves that's become dulled in us, that we've allowed to become dulled because it wasn't necessarily the relationship didn't give us that, but that we hadn't sorted out some other area of life. Because as we know, like, we can become alive and have those incredible physical
in a
sensations,
millisecond,
you know, and also through a myriad of different things, through a new hobby that we try, or through something else.
So, right, what is an affair as well is a really interesting definition.
Yeah.
Because you and I have spoken about so many times that there are things more intimate than sex.
Yeah.
So is the definition of an affair when genitals touch, or is an affair something way before that? Yeah. Because I mean, I toy with this all the time, because I think I don't want to be in the state where I'm in denial. It could never happen to me, or I could never do that, because I know so intimately that whatever I condemn, I will breed, attract, or become it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, in a way, I'm humbling myself constantly with affairs, and particularly when I'm looking at, you know, what is it that makes an ecstatic monogamous relationship. I tap dance this edge all of the time. Like I have spoken to you before about how do I, you know, show up every day, you know, parenting and doing what I do, because I'm thinking every day I ask myself, if today was my last day on this earth, have I done enough? Have I shown up? Have I shown my kids what I want to leave them with? If I were to die today, have I shown them what I want them to know? And that's how I enter each day. And that's how I enter my relationship in a way. I'm thinking, have I shown up enough?
Yeah.
Have I given everything? And if I haven't, why haven't I? Where have I shied away? Yeah, what am I afraid of? Where am I cowering rather than standing? Where am I shying away rather than stepping into? Why am I closing that part of myself off? Why am I shutting that down? Why am I not making steps towards it being different? Because I am the dynamic. I mean, he is and isn't everything, you know.
Yeah.
It's all me, really.
And your own consciousness is creating the reflection that you see. So where are you asking yourself to grow?
Yeah. And so I kind of tap into this thinking about infidelity in that way. Have I done enough to show up? But also that I could be that. I mean, I know, and you and I have spoken about, I know and so understand the movement of our sexual energy that I know now enough that I have a level, not a mastery of it, but I have a level of awareness and capacity for movement.
Yeah.
Certainly wouldn't consider myself a master in it, but I understand it. And so I can breathe an attraction in and know that I can use that for my own energy, my own life force. I can drive that energy into creating content for our business. I can drive that into creating emotions within my relationship. I can drive that into being playful with my children. Sexual energy is life energy.
Yeah.
But when we're not getting it, we will often manifest situations in which it's triggered within us because we need it. It's life energy. And if we're not consciously doing it, we will unconsciously manifest a situation in which we can do that.
Yeah.
And I love people. Like you and I love people.
Yeah.
And I will love you in a moment and I will open my heart and my body and in a way that can feel like an affair. And because I know this exchange of energy that could almost be an exchange of body fluids, right? It feels sometimes really intimate.
Yeah.
And I think, what is an affair? Because I think, Bridget, I probably had 20 affairs with you over the course of the years that, you know, we haven't had sex.
No.
But we've been really intimate. Yeah.
And there's a filling ourselves up in that. And so if we're talking about, you know, a metaphysical filling up or a physical filling up.
Yeah, exactly.
One we keep, one we see as socially acceptable and one we see as not. And I do think this idea of affairs is really... Everyone's having an affairs.
Yes.
It's just in a form that's socially acceptable and socially not acceptable.
Yeah. And the amount of awareness you bring to it, I think, is important too, because I can get swept up in my, in inverted commas, infatuation, or really just my infatuation with the feelings that that are arising within me around another person.
Yeah.
And I could say, oh my God, I don't get that with my husband. Yes. I must be really feeling this.
Or I mustn't be in love with him anymore because I couldn't feel like this about another person if I was in love with my husband, which is the biggest fallacy.
Or I can't be like this with this person, or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And I also think I also completely understand that the intensity of those feelings that I could choose to release into those any moment I liked. And so when we were talking before, we were talking about boundaries. You know, like I can feel those feelings, but I can know my boundary and know I'm safe within that because it's there. But if we're not used to that, if we're not bringing awareness to those feelings, I can see how it's deliciously easy to slip over them. And this is when affairs become physical, I think.
Yeah. And then I think depending on your level of ownership and awareness of what's playing out, you'll either demonize yourself or make your behavior okay in order to continue to get away with it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I do.
Because we can convince ourselves of anything if we want it enough.
Oh, can't we? We are just so masterful at the stories that we weave. Yeah.
And I think that's also what happens when, you know, affairs turn nasty when there's entitlement involved and when someone's like, well, you don't do this for me and this person does this for me and like you're never this and this other person's always that, and which is complete black and white thinking, and it shows that you're completely stuck in an infatuation and, you know, a building infatuation for somebody outside the relationship and a growing resentment of your relationship because you've got this massive polarization happening, which, you know, as you've seen with friendships that you know, like that just,
also flips.
You go
on you.
screaming into a sledgehammer of a reality check in terms of the resentment that you didn't know was hiding behind the infatuation that you were having on this person. Yeah. It's there.
No, it is there. And to the point where, you know, I mean, I won't be specific, but I can think of a really specific situation where that infatuation and fantasy was so intense with this person They were everything. They were amazing. I've never felt like this before in my life. I've never had this before. I just can't stop, blah, 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 blah. And then flash forward, after disintegrating of the life that was, and screaming into a massive nightmare, like control, violence, abuse. Like that was always there. But when we're in infatuation and fantasy, we're just building a nightmare.
Yeah. And we can't see it because we're blocking it out. Like we're not consciously doing it, but we are filtering our reality to see the parts that we want to see, and the less awareness we bring to what we're seeing in front of us, the more we are hiding the other side for us to go smack bang into.
Because feelings at the end are not a truth.
No, they're one-sided. Like they are feedback for us to understand and build a picture of, but they are not necessarily what we should inherently trust. They're like little breadcrumbs for us to build understanding on.
All right, so that's the background. So now bringing it back to our title.
Yes.
The desire for our relationship to fulfill everything for us. I can see how to some extent, we all want this. We all want our partner to think the same and do the same things and value the same things and have the same opinions and agree with us.
Yes.
Because you arsehole when you don't agree with me.
Yeah, and don't you know I'm right?
Yeah. Because clearly this is the way the world is.
Yes.
Which you and I can laugh about. And I giggle sometimes when I hear it from my sister or my friends and they're like, but and I'm like, because the world's just the way you see it.
Yeah.
And we're so convinced that the world is the way that we see it.
Yeah.
And the truth is, everybody thinks that.
Yeah, exactly. And, I got to say, having the awareness that we have is just saves me in so many situations, because even this last week I've been doing these birth films. And, in these films, this husband is just the most beautiful holder of space. Like you just swoon, right? And the background is my husband, who finds birth icky and is not interested, and even whenever he sees me on sometimes I'm on social media and I a picture of flick her home
because our whole feed is like birth.
Yeah, birth. So I'm looking at this incredible footling breech birth and thinking it's so beautiful, and Marcus is like, oh. And we're talking about different things, and so we know we have such different values on this, and we laugh about it, and he can still be interested in what I do without having to like it, because he was talking about my vets and how they went, and he's like, oh, you did so well to bring those people together, and he doesn't care about it, but he sees that I care about it. So we don't have to love people's values to still value and respect.
It's the appreciation factor. I think we forget this a lot in relationship, and affirmation.
Yeah.
Often that is the strongest kicker aside from our reflected sense of self that we see in affairs. They just appreciate me in a way that I have not used to being appreciated, and they see me because I'm unseen in my relationship. And we often forget this, particularly when we're talking about communicating with the masculine, is the level of affirmation that's required. It can seem a bit
demanding.
Well, in a way I'm kind of thinking a bit almost like, oh, really, do I have to mother them? But it's not like that. It's actually being willing to see the beauty in this person and being willing to reflect that beauty back to them. Yeah. Because we can get so stuck in this, take for granted, until, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Thank you, Joni Mitchell. I love you. And I just think when you start to really watch what happens around your partners at work, at workplaces in particular, with friends, certainly with friends, partners, whatever of the same sex, you start to see them appreciating things about your partner that you can't even see. Oh my God, you and I had this conversation about my husband several weeks ago.
Yeah, we did, didn't we? Yeah.
This is in the feminine masculine thing, and he'd been driving me nuts, and I was hardcore in my masculine because we were mid-reno. And Bridget's husband's incredibly handy, and he was over doing some handiwork with my husband on our house. And he'd made some comment when I'd come over to your husband, I'd come over to your house, and he was like, oh, God, he's just such a huge brute of a man, and he's just drilling stuff in and, and talking about this kind of masculine figure. And I'm like, really? Because all I can see is the feminine. But I just thought this is so perfect, right? Yeah. Because I can't see it It's not that he isn't it.
It's just that you've got this story that
right.
he's not that.
And I brought it to you that night. I was like, oh, I can see what's going on here.
Yeah.
And this is perfect, right? Because our world is always talking to us if we're willing to read it.
Yeah.
And so it was my really big call for, okay, he is that. So how am I filling it, which is where that podcast has come from? How am I taking up all of that space? There's none left for him to step into that.
Yeah.
And how can I shift my belief system to actually seeing it? Because often it starts with the affirmation. Oh, the stacking of evidence. You are that. Oh, there you just did it. Oh, okay. Oh, you just did it again. Oh, there you are again. Right.
Oh.
And just being able to...
Maybe my truth is not so true after all.
But just actually stating it. There's something about stating it out loud. I see it in you because what you see grows. What you appreciate appreciates.
It's so true. And it's the same thing, it's this whole idea, and the Queen's Code talks about this a lot, is what you know, for all the things we're looking for our partner to do for us, we've actually got to be willing to do for them.
Yeah.
You know, to appreciate them and to speak, you know, those words of affirmation for them. And that is going to create that in the dynamic.
Yeah.
Not, you know, get stuck in this, well, they don't do this and they don't provide this for me and I feel like I'm constantly asking for this. Well, how do we lean and give what we want to receive?
And how do we affirm it? And how do we have really clear communication so that there's nothing left to assumption? And at the same time, I really love this point of our partner can never be everything as well. So we're asking two things of you here really, which is what we ask of our tribe, is to see how in and of themselves they already are everything, same as you are. And all that stands in the way of you seeing that is you and your beliefs and perceptions.
Yeah.
So then we ask you to peel back where that's coming from. And then we ask you to say, how can you, because there's nothing worse than neediness. When people cling tighter, someone wants to retract.
Yeah.
So, and that's, you know, I think probably the wrong words. I was going to say law of conservation, which I don't think it is, but just that concept of the tighter you cling, no different to our children, the tighter we cling, the more we're going to be building this idea of pushing away because there's only so much that someone can take before they need separation. And I think there's a lot to be said for empowering those areas of life that feel disempowered to you, knowing that when you do that for yourself, when you become the everything to yourself, you get to appreciate your partner within that, not need them to have that. I think that's a really different place to be. And being under-empowered is when you will find someone who will overpower that area of life. And usually it's the things we don't want to do that we find the hardest. But stepping up and into that, like the beautiful advice that your mum gave you, is keep a piece of yourself. Don't give over everything into this relationship. Don't give over everything in this melding of and loss of, you know, wallowing in who you are in these other identities. Is who are you at the center of that, and holding on to there enough separateness that it's exciting to be around you. Because if you're the same, one of you won't be needed. You still have to have enough selfishness and sense of self and identity within a relationship that there's overlap but separateness. There's adventure and there's
familiarity.
Yeah. You have to have both. And when you give away one either way, you're going to run into trouble. So I just find, as you do, relationships incredibly fascinating. So we would really love you to dive into Loathing to Loving with us and disintegrate, break apart, break through, break down all of your relationship stuff, because relationship is honestly our biggest mirror in terms of our own self-evolution. And nowhere will you find a stronger signpost for your change and evolution. And when you change yourselves, your world really does change around you. You don't need to get someone else to do it for you. You don't need to hold on to the fact that you're more evolved than they are, because you're still running into a story if that's where you're at.
And they're evolving, but in different ways. We are constantly evolving.
Yep.
And we are all things, but we are all things in our own value systems, and we're in our own set of values. And so I think a classic one, I think, for women can be judging the masculine as lazy or not doing enough. And that will usually be because we're projecting our values of what we think that looks like onto them and expecting them to fit inside those. Whereas they're going to be both active and inspired and lazy and, you know, brutish and kicking back, in accordance with the ways that we are doing that too, but we're not being aware of where we do it, so we project it out onto them and make it them. So noticing, I mean, and I love how Loathing to Loving gets us to do this, because so often in the shadow week, we'll notice the words that we would most recoil at being called, and realize that that's the very thing that we also project out and judge on our intimate relationships.
Yeah.
Because that's a part of ourselves we're most unwilling to own.
Yeah.
And our relationship will call us to those parts, because it's like us, our intuition whispering us, saying, here, this is your next path of growth. Are you ready for it? Can you handle it?
Yeah.
Look closer.
Bust it.
Yeah, bust it. So please consider diving in.
Yes. So nourishingthemother.com.au/online programs, Loathing to Loving. And to connect with us, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest, Nourishing the Mother. And where else? That's it. But we would love you to private message us or email us any epiphanies, awakenings, any
podcast topics.
I was about to say, topics, because we really do love answering questions. In some ways, we find that a heck of a lot easier than just trying to riff on a topic together that we've just concocted
5 minutes before we started.
So please keep in contact with us. We really do adore hearing just the ripples out into the world, and just busts our heart open to realise that this tiny slice of time that we spend with you can really have an immense impact on your world. And we just like heart kiss the ground, you know, cannot get enough of just, I don't know, loving it. Just feels so, I can't not even articulating because I'm feeling it, but we really love the fact that we can spend this time with you intimately in your ears, in your quiet time, your private time, and we know that's really treasured and special, and we really love that. So please communicate with us.
And remember to nourish the mother, to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.